Hi, I'm Josh Curving. Welcome to another Death Battle prediction video. But first, Epyon versus Tigerzord. Though the fight did go in Epyon's favor, there are certainly some issues that I have with this fight. Some of the scaling that they use, like they specifically said in Goku vs. Superman that they don't use power scaling, but they clearly just applied all the physical stats of any Power Ranger to the White Ranger. Doesn't really work, especially not when you say that the physical power of the Tigerzord is scaled from the White Ranger, because that straight up doesn't work. You've got to have scaling from something else, his actual feats maybe. And they also lowballed the Epyon's speed a lot. Like, they said it was under Mach 1, which is absolutely asinine. The thing achieves escape velocity and has been shown to catch up to fighter jets moving at top speed, so there's no feasible way that it was that slow. Like, I know that they had to just gimp the Epyon and buff the Tigerzord to make it seem like a fair fight, but it just makes it for uninteresting when you compare it to what it should be. Anyway, the animation I have a major gripe with, but it was a good fight. The fight itself was fantastic. I think the kill was probably one of my favorites we've had. The explosion was friggin' cool looking. But my main thing is the portrayal of Zechs. Zechs isn't... like, they treated him like he was just a complete emo, whiny bitch kind of character. Which he's not. Like, they really, really overstated that. And I felt like killing Noin was just unnecessary. She's not Slippy. Like, everyone doesn't hate her. She's actually a good character. So to just kill her off like that was in really bad taste. But they treated him like he was freaking Sasuke from Naruto, like, just angst. He's not quite that bad for it, and I feel like what they had to do with this one was, because it was one-sided, because one of the characters is more comedic, they wanted to go the He-Man versus Lion-O route, where the comedy was actually one of the best aspects, but that doesn't apply itself well to Zechs because he's a more serious character. So instead, they just play up the one aspect that they can, which is the fact that he is a bit angsty. He's not that angsty, but a bit. Overall, though, it was a good episode, even though it had some major, major faults. It was good to see the Gundams get recognition. Anyway, the next one. Ryu versus Scorpion. This is actually a fight that I thought was going to be pretty damn close. But upon research, like, it's a bit one-sided. It's not quite like Epyon versus Tigerzord one-sided, but it's still going to be probably a curb stomp match. So you got Ryu, who, he's pretty old. He's like 53, I'm pretty sure. And he travels the world fighting, has won several World Fighter tournaments. You've got Hanzo Hasashi, Scorpion, who basically stayed out of the assassin life at first, then went into it, and then got killed by Scorpion, and came back with all sorts of hell powers. So this is going to be an interesting one, because we know a little bit of what they're going to give them from the previews, but we don't know everything yet. And Evil Ryu is going to come into play huge here, though it might not end up mattering. So we'll go into my typical 3 stats. We'll start with Scorpion. With his strength, he doesn't have that many strength feats, like, outside of gameplay, so all you can really do is apply the best case scenario gameplay stuff. So say like a heavier fighter like Goro, he can punch him like 15 feet in the air, which is decent. It's definitely better than most people can do. Anyone, actually. For durability, again, he gets hit by people like Shao Kahn and Goro, though at that point I believe they are limited by the rules of Mortal Kombat, which makes them, it's the game's method of balancing. Another durability feat of a more interesting variety is that he survived in the Soulnado. This isn't a standard durability feat, but it's more like soulfuck resistance. That actually will come into play here, surprisingly. It's pretty rare that there's ever any reason to use soulfuck resistance because very few characters attack the soul. But as it's going to come up later, Ryu can. For speed, there's this speed feat that I definitely disagree with, but some people freaking swear by it. It's when Reptile is coming up this building and Stryker is trying to shoot at him, and Reptile's doing this back and forth motion while Stryker is missing horribly. People say that that counts as a bullet timing feat, when in all seriousness it just looks like Stryker was trained by stormtroopers. But if people are accepting it, then it probably places Scorpion around Mach 2-ish, which will come up later. Now for Ryu. For strength feat, he quite literally lifted a 25-ton boulder. That's actually a bit of a low ball because I took the low end for rock for the weight, and when I did some counting for how big the thing was, I used an egg shape instead of what seems to be like a rounded rectangular prism. So there's definitely corners cut off there, so it's probably closer to 27 or something like that. But the rock in question is this one here. So yeah, that's one hell of a strength feat. So then we get durability. Ryu's been hit by some people like Akuma, who can sink an island, Hugo, who can lift up a truck and throw it, and as well he's been hit by bladed weapons before, such as those used by Ibuki. Vega is kind of the classic one. Sodom, they've all used bladed weapons, and Ryu seems to have no problem with that, considering he's one of the top tier characters in Street Fighter. For speed, there was a statement that Guile's Sonic Boom is Mach 2, and so Ryu dodges this all the time, and he's dodged it in, I believe, the animated media as well, which basically means that Ryu should be able to be scaled to Mach 2. So now we get into the equipment and abilities of the characters. For Scorpion, he uses his spears, swords, axes. He can take off his mask and use his fire breath from the skull, and he can teleport. As well, he has upgraded versions of these attacks, most of which just add fire to the attack, though the spear makes him launch 2. And even then, most of Scorpion's fatalities are actually just slicing and attacks like that. There's only a couple of them that do anything notable, like what Sector had. Some of them that he uses, like a giant handle come up and it'll like squeeze a person and basically burn them. He can bring them to the nether realm where the undead people of his clan will come and try to attack the person, which I personally think we would be able to probably deal with them, but I'm not sure. We'll probably see that, actually. He also can transform into a scorpion, which, though it's not his animality, that one is actually probably able to be taken more seriously than the animality, where he turns into a penguin. Yeah, those didn't make sense. But yeah, as well, he has basically just slicing attacks. mostly bladed weapons, though he also does a few like cartwheel kicks and air throws as well. For Ryu, he has his Hadokens, which can destroy evil. Now this is where that weird durability feat for Scorpion is going to come into play, because destruction of evil is a soul attack. It's attacking the soul, and so that would be where your kind of spiritual resistance would come into play. I'm pretty sure Scorpion's like pretty damn evil, considering he's basically a wraith and a spirit of vengeance. It stands to reason that the Hadoken would destroy evil fairly well. But now we actually have some gauge of that Scorpion can defend himself from that, because if he didn't have that feat, it stands to reason that, like, within about 3 or 4 Hadokens, he would start really feeling that, because it would start sapping away at his evil power, and he would probably succumb to it pretty quickly. But now he won't, because he has been shown to be spiritually powerful enough to resist it. He has the Shoryuken, which is an uppercut that was capable of basically ripping Sagat's chest open. He's got the Tatsumaki Sanpyaku, which is a gravity-defying hurricane kick. It's probably one of my favorite moves in Street Fighter. It's pretty awesome and can be good for navigation as well as just quickly approaching an enemy. He also has, I don't recall the Japanese name for it, but his like step kick launches enemies extremely far. He also has an air throw, and I don't know if they're going to be giving him anything from Marvel vs. Capcom 3. He doesn't really need any of it, because it's just bigger versions of his attacks. But there's the possibility that they will. But even his hypers, he has like a larger Hadoken. He has the Shin Shoryuken, which is basically a stronger multi-hit uppercut. But then basically his ace in the hole here is the Satsui no Hado, which is basically what Akuma has. Now, I've seen some people say that if Scorpion can get Ryu to the Netherworld, which he's capable of through the teleporting, then Ryu absolutely loses, because there's no way for Ryu to kill Scorpion, because he'll just keep infinitely respawning. What's interesting about that is that in the past, Death Battle has not looked at respawning as a thing. If you die, that's it, the fight's over. But if they do take that into account, then Ryu still has the Satsui no Hado and the why am I not remembering the name of that attack? Akuma's Raging Demon attack, where he like one-shots people. So that is an attack to the soul, and even extremely spiritual characters have died from it. That said, I don't think it's going to end up mattering, because while speed is fairly even, most of Ryu's attacks are extremely powerful. His Hadokens have destroyed buildings. His durability is extraordinary, and lesser characters have been shown to survive kicks that explode fighter jets. Just, it's his stats that end up overpowering Scorpion, like, and we've seen where tools overpower the stats, but not in this case, because a lot of Ryu's attacks are just too powerful, and given the strength feat where he lifts up the boulder, Ryu he could probably like 1 or 2 shot Scorpion. He doesn't have the durability feats to match up to someone who can lift 25 tons. That's him turning into a fine red mist after a single punch. The evil Ryu is kind of overkill. You don't need it. And as another point that needs to be addressed, there are two games that are sometimes looked at for this debate, one of which is Asura's Wrath, and the other of which is actually a combination of DC versus Mortal Kombat and Injustice Gods Among Us. For the first one, for Asura's Wrath, someone said that there was a statement that is an accurate representation of Ryu's power, in which he gets punched to the moon, which I actually calculated to being around 11,000 megatons, which is 55 SAR bombs, I believe, which would just make it a curb stomp. There'd be no feasible way for Scorpion to win. I don't think it's going to be included. If it is, I will be incredibly surprised. For Scorpion's side, both Injustice Gods Among Us and Mortal Kombat vs. DC had explanations for why they were capable of keeping up with these characters. Some people say that, for example, in Injustice Gods Among Us, Scorpion's ending involves him beating Trigon. That is a ridiculous outlier, like ridiculously huge outlier. Not only that, but the reason that he is capable of doing that is because of, I believe it's a power-up by another character, and in the other one it is a pill that increases their strength, speed, and durability so that they can even stand a chance against the DC characters. So both of those count as outside help and should not be taken into account. So I'm kind of just ruling out Asura's Wrath and Injustice Gods Among Us, as well as Mortal Kombat versus DC entirely, because they're outliers hugely. Though basically the best person that Ryu has faced is Akuma. So that's kind of my opinion on this fight. This is definitely a long one. It's gonna be an awesome fight. This is one of those like classic video game fights that people want to see. I've seen some really cool versions of it, and I hope that this one is going to be even better. So that's everything for now. I will see you guys in a couple weeks.